Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'll give you a little bit of context on the book, its impact on me, and then I will go into 5 different life lessons that I learned from the book. Ready? Let's dive right in. Background: who is Marcus Aurelius and what exactly is this book? So this book is actually one of the main ones that you'll hear about from people who are fans of Stoicism. So what is Stoicism? It's actually an ancient philosophy that started way back in ancient Greece and Rome, and it's all about how to live what I would call a good life. Whether it's being ethical or virtuous or at peace, really however you want to define that. Now the word Stoic often also has the connotation of being emotionless, but it's really not that. Actually, one of the best ways I've heard of describing the concept of Stoicism is as an operating system for everyday life today. Especially for people who may not subscribe to any particular religion, such as myself, it's really just an alternative that provides some good guidance on how to live a good life. And it's not supposed to be some really esoteric piece of philosophy that you need a PhD to understand. It's really meant to be practical and useful for your everyday life. So what exactly is this book? Well, it is the private diary of one of the emperors of Rome, Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor from 161 to 180 CE. During that era, he would have been one of the most powerful people in the entire world, and so it's really interesting just to have something written by someone like that. Now, Meditations is actually structured in a pretty unique way. It's broken into 12 different books. Each book has about 40 to 50 different smaller passages. Some of them are only 1 or 2 sentences long, some of them are a few paragraphs long. And it's kind of funny because you'll often see people quote from the passages of this book as if it was the Bible. Usually there's like a book number and then a passage number, such as Meditations 4:7, which is actually a passage that I will quote later in the video, so stay tuned. And so in these passages, you basically have Marcus Aurelius writing these small pearls of wisdom to himself. Constant reminders and really repetitive actually of how to live a good life. And it's really interesting to see because even though he was one of the most powerful people in the world at that time, and you might think hey, this guy is not going to be relatable, actually most of the stuff that he's dealing with are very relatable and relevant for my life, and I would bet yours as well. Things like how to handle people in your life, how to handle emotions, how to treat situations better, how to get through tough circumstances, stuff like that. This edition I have here is 170 pages. You can go through it back to front all at once, or you can read it over a longer period of time, just reading a couple passages a day. Okay, so for the rest of this video, I want to share a little bit of what I learned when I read this book. And so I'm breaking it up into 5 different lessons that I've learned that have helped impact my life. And then there are a few specific passages along the way that I will quote that especially impacted me. All right, so let's go through the lessons. Lesson 1, change how you perceive the world. Now there's a constant theme around taking events and things that are happening in your life and perceiving them in a more helpful and constructive way. And especially taking things that you might call quote unquote negative events and turning them around into something that you can do something more with. Or breaking down things that you might be afraid of to see it for what it really is. Or even breaking down things that you desire or that you're breaking your back to go after, such as love or money or fame, and really seeing it for what it is, which takes the power out of it a little bit. Okay, so here are some of my favorite quotes that illustrate these points. It is, in other words, not objects and events, but the interpretations that we place on them that are the problem. Our duty is therefore to exercise stringent control over the faculty of perception with the aim of protecting our mind from error. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. It's unfortunate that this happened to me. No, it's fortunate that this happened and that I have remained unharmed by it, not shadowed by the present or frightened of the future. It could have happened to anyone, but not everyone could have remained unharmed by it. So I think some of these ideas are really powerful. You might have heard of this term called the victim mindset, and it's a really easy mindset to fall into. And in my life, it's also been easy to fall into sometimes just because there's always been challenges such as my race or my sexuality or the fact that I haven't always been in shape or looked the way that I wanted to. But I really love the idea that you can really control how you perceive these things that happen in your life and that you don't have to let them break you. Okay, and then one other concept related to this whole idea of perception, like seeing roasted meat and other dishes in front of you and suddenly realizing this is a dead fish, a dead bird, a dead pig, or that this noble vintage is grape juice, and the purple robes are sheep wool dyed with shellfish blood. Perceptions like that, flashing onto things and piercing through them so we see what they really are. Now this really hits home for me and just thinking through some of the things that I am chasing after in my life, whether that is friends or social approval or good food or material goods. I love the idea of breaking these things down and realizing that yes, these things are good, these are pleasurable, but at the end of the day, they're not really that good. They're not gonna really move the needle on my happiness long term. And that there's always both pleasure and pain that comes with many of these things. So in sum, the basic idea is that if you can see these things for what they really are, which is usually neutral events or neutral things happening in your life, that are neither bad nor good, then it can really take a lot of the power out of them. And realizing this has really just helped me chill out and relax a little bit more in life. Lesson 2, check your expectations. Secondly, he repeats this idea of really looking at your expectations for what happens in life and not being surprised by negative events or circumstances that might happen. A good example is if you come across someone who is rude to you or who is thoughtless. Now, should you really be surprised when something like this happens, especially if it's someone that you already know to be rude or thoughtless? It's really a part of the nature of that particular person or those things that are happening in your life, or really of the world. You're going to come across these types of people and these types of things, so should you really be surprised at the end of the day? Now, here's one of the passages that gets this across the best. Remember, you shouldn't be surprised that a fig tree produces figs, nor the world what it produces. A good doctor isn't surprised when his patients have fevers, or a helmsman when the wind blows against him. Now, I really like this idea, and honestly, one of the first things that comes to mind in my own life is a couple of people who I know who are friends of mine who might even be watching this, and they like to criticize, they like to give helpful suggestions to you, or some people might even say that they like to be like naysayers in some way. And I used to view this all negatively, but then ideas like this one in this book helped me realize that first of all, it's the nature of these people, these things, and I can't really expect anything less, and maybe it's not really that bad in the first place. And then secondly, most of these people are just trying to help, and who could fault them for that? You know how they say that happiness is expectations minus reality, and so for me, this is all really just about maintaining low expectations for the world. That might seem like a really depressing thought, but it's actually one that has helped me live more at peace. Lesson 3, focus on your own actions. Another theme that I really like in this book is this whole idea of focusing what is in your own control. This idea is actually pretty related to what I went through in lesson 1 around focusing on how you perceive things. And in fact, this whole idea of focusing on what's in your own control is really one of the central ideas of Stoicism, even outside of this book, Meditations. Now, the first quote that I want to use to illustrate this is actually a continuation of a quote that we looked at earlier. It says, "What's happened keep you from acting with justice, generosity, self-control, sanity, prudence, honesty, humility, straightforwardness, and all the other qualities that allow a person's nature to fulfill itself. So remember this principle when something threatens to cause you pain. The thing itself was no misfortune at all. To endure and prevail is a great good fortune." And then a couple other quotes. "No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good, like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald, my color undiminished." You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Things can't shape our decisions by themselves. So really the idea here is focus on your own actions, and I'll take it a step further and say to really focus on your response to what happens in life and not the actual things that are happening to you in life. And one area that this has really come up in my life is in situations where I feel maybe I've been mistreated or where someone is just treating me differently from how I would have treated them. And just realizing that all I can really control in those situations is how I respond. My response won't always fix the situation completely, but at the very least, I have in my power to not make the situation worse, first of all, and usually I have it in my power to make the situation at least somewhat better. Lesson 4, turn obstacles to your advantage. Okay, now the penultimate lesson of this list. This was actually one of the ideas that introduced me to the whole concept of Stoicism in general. The first time I learned about this idea was actually not from the book Meditations, but rather from another book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Now, I also highly recommend that book, and I actually might do a review on that at some point. The basic idea is that when people normally think about obstacles, they think about it as just that, things that are blocking their path, an impediment to what it is that they want to try to do. At best, it's something that you can overcome, but still not something that's really desirable in your life. But what this whole idea is about is, what if you looked at it another way? What if you actually looked at obstacles as a way that could propel you forward? Now, here's the quote that I think best lands this point. "In a sense, people are our proper occupation. Our job is to do them good and put up with them, but when they obstruct our proper tasks, they become irrelevant to us, like sun, wind, animals. Our actions may be impeded by them, but there can be no impeding our intentions or our dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." I think that whole idea is so powerful. In this quote, he's talking about people that might be an impediment to your action, but I think it really extends way beyond that to really any obstacle, any adversity that you might be facing in your life. Now, another quote that just hits this idea home: "Just as nature takes every obstacle, every impediment, and works around it, turns it to its purposes, incorporates it into itself, so too a rational being can turn each setback into raw material and use it to achieve its goal." So the whole idea is do what nature does and take what happens to you and actually use it to your advantage. Now, ever since I found this idea, it has shown up just repeatedly over and over again in my life. For instance, maybe you're going through a breakup. why not use that as an opportunity to reinvent yourself, learn, try something new? Of course, it's going to be hard to go through, but it's also got a hidden gem in there that you can use to advance yourself. Now, this is actually what happened to me earlier this year in a breakup that I refer to in this video that I'll show somewhere on the screen about how I learned to ski this year. One of the reasons that I actually decided to learn to ski was because of this breakup and to just help propel myself forward. And then also the same breakup had a lot of kind of advantages that came to it. There's this other video that I shot that I'll link to somewhere on the screen, which is about how I basically have stopped drinking this year, and part of that was also catalyzed by this whole breakup. And so often there's a lot that you can squeeze out of different events that happen in your life. Maybe another example was that you're going through a rough patch with a friend or a coworker, and your normal tendency might be to say, oh, this is so bad, how am I going to handle this? I'm going to avoid talking to them about it. Often having that open conversation with them is actually the thing that can bring you closer, that can fix the situation and actually just make things even better than they would have been otherwise. And this has happened to me various times actually at work with coworkers and clients where there was some issue and then we had a conversation, and it actually made our working relationship a lot better at the end of the day. So all of this is really another way of saying that idea that you probably already heard of don't let a good crisis go to waste. Or as Ryan Holiday says in his book, The Obstacle is the Way, to really think of these obstacles as opportunities to test ourselves, to try new things, and ultimately to triumph. So take that adversity and really just milk it for all it's worth. Lesson 5, remember your mortality. So this is all that classic idea of you only live once, that idea that you could get hit by a bus at any point, you might not actually have tomorrow guaranteed to you, and so therefore you shouldn't wait, you shouldn't put off what it is that you want to do in your life. And so one of the basic quotes, the simplest quotes in meditations that illustrates this is the one that says, you could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think. Simple but powerful reminder, don't put things off. Don't live your life out of fear. But there's also another angle to this idea. The fact that we're all going to die means that none of this actually really matters in the long term. There's this whole concept that all these famous people in the past, whether it's people like Caesar or Napoleon or Alexander the Great, all of these people are dead. All of them are in the same ground that you and I will be in at some point. And yes, history does remember these people, but what good is that to them right now? They're dead. They don't know that we're still talking about them today. And so to them, it makes no difference if they were remembered or whether they were not. And so, it's just a great thing to put things into perspective. Those days where I'm obsessing over something that happened to me at work or with a friend or in my life in general, it's like, will I even remember this thing in a few days or a few weeks? Or even a few years? Probably not. And then even if I did, I'm just one person in a sea of billions of people in this one moment of time. It's like one period of hopefully like 100 years or so, but in the grand scheme of things, that is not very long. And so when you look at it that way, do these things really matter that much? Probably not. So in the moments where I can really just like internalize that and catch myself, even I would say moments like right now where I'm filming this video and I'm thinking, is this going to be a good video? Are people going to like it? It's a good reminder that I can just relax because it probably doesn't really matter much in the long run anyway. All right, with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I love talking about Stoicism and other philosophies similar to it around how to live a good life. And so if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. And of course, as always, if you liked this video, hit the like button, which will help others find it, and subscribe for more. All right, peace.